Welcome to the stage, Chairman at O'Neill and parent company Aloha Group, Daniel Neukomm, and guest on ABC's Shark Tank and co-founder of Kavu Consumer, Rohan Oza.
All right, guys. Nice to see you. We recognize we're competing with dry land right now, so it's nice to see all of you despite the appeal.
Front row, JB.
Okay. So I'm Daniel. I'm actually former O'Neill CEO. I'm exec chair, so I'm a recovering CEO, but recently merged to the dark side with Ro on all things investing in private equity. But I'll let you introduce yourself and take it from there.
Sure. Well, look, thanks for coming, guys. I know that my fiance would prefer to be at mapping the human genome, but for those who just like to deal with raw, real brands and products and stuff, it's a little simpler. That's us. You eat it, drink it, wear it. That's us. High intellect, you pick another location. But thanks for coming. Excited to talk about, for those of you interested, building iconic brands in today's world. It's a little different. And so part of it is we're going to go through just free-flowing dialogue on just how things are changing, how brands get created in today's world. A lot of you are trying to create your own companies, your own brands. And then we want to run a bunch of questions as well, because I think I also hate it when people speak at you, unless it's the AI guys, because they're bloody brilliant. But for the rest of us, I think it's great if you guys want to lob a bunch of questions and get some real thoughts. I'm fairly unvarnished, so please don't publish anything, because I don't know what I say half the time. But Daniel's leading the whole process, so I'll let you drive the wheel.
Yeah. So thanks, Ro. Before we get into this, let me give you a biased version of a cool iconic brand. So let's roll the O'Neill surf porn. It's always amazing to watch that because I'm a shitty surfer, which actually will correlate to successful brands at scale later. But I have to, since you're a guest shark on Shark Tank, ask you what the kind of most interesting, fun experience has been on Shark Tank.
Fun experience. Well, the first time I actually went to Shark Tank, ironic because we're on a Virgin cruise, but it was, when billionaires get together, who's got the bigger appendage, effectively. So it was a combination of Mark Cuban, because he's the resident, billionaire on deck, as it were. And, he likes being the authoritarian on Shark. So Mark was doing his thing. And enter a billionaire who doesn't like to follow a conventional path, for sure, and Richard Branson. And so they got at it. And Richard was basically funding everybody. It was almost like Christmas. And Mark's like, this is called Shark Tank. It's not Goldfish Tank. And Richard's like, fuck you. And he threw the water at him.
That's awesome.
So that's how that went down. And they loved it. Obviously made for great TV. Mark's all wet. But that was an interesting moment. And the other one that I felt bad on, but it's what I love about Shark Tank is it's real. If people don't come on board and everyone gets a deal, people are kind of beaten up a little bit as well. And I think that's real life. I look around the room and I see some friends of mine, founders who've been through it. JB right in the front row, created an amazingly iconic brand. It became one of the hottest brands in food and beverage. And then it got beat. And then he somehow pivoted. It's a rare pivot that works. And then it exploded again. The brand's called Suja, for those of you who know it. And that's real life. It's not just steady state. And he went through it without giving details of what he had to do, but he had to make some major life moves for your brand to survive. And I think Shark Tank, it's when people come on and pitch, they give it their all. A lot of people have really put, and sometimes I'm like, why they did it, all their life savings into some of these products. And it's real from the judges. And so I like it because people walk away either with stuff that's gonna, do really well, like Joe the hammock guy, who's now doing, $10 million there. He's right there, Joe, $10 million a year. He's saying more than that this year. We have a bet, but that it's the American dream. It's what makes this country bloody amazing, and it is the epitome of the American dream. But also, if you come with a dumb idea, the sharks will, destroy you.
Except for you, you just keep your opinion to yourself and don't.
Yeah, I'm very quiet.
Yeah. Well, I think let's get into it. I mean, one of my favorite quotes from Mr. Wonderful on Shark Tank is and I've used this unfortunately in boardrooms occasionally, where I say, "So you're saying we could literally make hundreds of dollars off of this investment?" I'm like, hold my hand, look me in the eye, and say that again slowly out loud. But I think it's kind of the epitome of the opposite end of the spectrum we're going to talk about today. But there's a lot of startups and founders and stuff here. But one thing that maybe gets lost on people is just the difference between an emerging brand in its early stages and what it takes at scale. And we were joking about what to call this talk, which I'll share. I guess this is a hot mic, but it was like euthanasia or unicorn. And maybe let's talk a little bit about just how to just start with failures and how to embrace them. And there's a lot of people in the audience that are appear successful, kind of at face value, but are struggling. We've all gone through these, massive roller coaster of evolution. Any examples of really impressive failures? Like who's in all your portfolio? Like who's failed the best?
Yeah. So the slightly gory headline who had this right was euthanasia to unicorn. So if it's a bad idea, kill it quick or put it away, and if it's a great idea, take it to the promised land, kind of thing. I think a big part of what I talk about when I give speeches is you kind of have to fail. And I think if you've never failed, unless you're blind lucky, but you can never really succeed because you have to learn from the failures to get, and every major successful person talks about it, but you have to have real failures, but you learn fast. So if you fail too many times, then you're complete toast. But for me, some of it's simple stuff, but when I first started I do food, beverage, beauty, pet. Yes, sorry, yeah. Fiance loves dogs. We have to get 2 dogs, and so don't forget the pet category. And I think the problem with consumer is everybody's got an opinion, right? Everybody in this room eats, drinks, wears clothing. If you have 50% of you have pets, maybe 60% in this room probably, you obviously have thoughts on what to give them, what to feed them. Everyone's got 2 cents opinion. So the danger of consumer is you rely too much on just, I love the product. And the failures that I've had is when I've done that. And it's, it's been on trend. And probably one of the big ones I had was a brand called Chef's Cut. It was a beef jerky. Thing was doing phenomenal. It was a great story. I found 2 caddies on a golf course that had created this product, because for those who play golf, but basically all the food when you play golf just makes you fat. Fundamentally, you go around a golf course. And they created this great jerky that was fantastic, on trend, high protein, low sugar. I said, let's do this. I thought, it's the American dream. So I funded them, and we grew from nothing to $30 million in 4 years. And I'm like, wow, this is legit. But at the same time, and I think the world is now changing, which people are realizing, you kind of have to make money. I think there was a whole period where people forgot that you actually had to make money because Amazon had trained everyone that it's okay to be $1 trillion and not make money, although he could turn the money engine on in 2 seconds. And I think everyone was like, no, my revenue, how big is your company? They're like, yeah, we've got 500 people and ARR is 600 million. How much are you making? No, it's no big deal. We lose 90 million last year. I'm like, what? I'm like, yeah, but next year's gonna be much better. I'm like, what, 60 million loss? I'm like, so in 2 years, you lost $150 million. So that was a problem. But I was in that stupidity mindset where I'm like, someone's gonna buy me. And the problem is, it's something called gross margin, which seems like a very simple statement, but if you have bad gross margins, you will take it in places you don't want to take it. And so the issue for me was we were so leaning in on brand and cool and trend, we didn't get the operations changed on us. And there is a 800-pound gorilla in Jack Link's that just basically dropped their price, and so everyone had to go follow suit. And so I think part of it is we didn't know all the way through the fundamentals, and it was painful because I felt bad for these guys. They were amazing, guys, two guys had nothing. We built this thing together, but in the end, we couldn't sell it because we were losing too much money. So whoever wanted to buy it wasn't overly excited about the 40 million revenue. They were more concerned about the 6 million loss, which I don't blame them. So, I pumped a bunch of personal money in, we invested in it, it didn't work. And now we've learned from that. So, when we invested in actually a brilliant founder here on the cruise ship called Kurt in Vital Proteins, we're like, Kurt, what's the gross margin? Like 80%. I'm like, let's go, we're in. And so you live and learn and you go on to much better deals.
That's a really successful example. Vital Proteins crushed it. Kurt's a good guy. It brings me to this next question where obviously being nimble, external market conditions shift. To your point about, Amazon dictating enterprise value based on velocity and growth despite negative gross margin. Companies are constantly trying to pull and tug in between. And one of the things that's been meaningful in my career is, I'm not a brand evangelist. I'm not a founder. I know my role. And it's really, more as kind of process engineering and data-driven decision-making. And any examples in your portfolio of brands that are kind of have gone through that evolution successfully, and maybe speak a little bit to the the difference between founders and kind of professional CEOs, and maybe how that's come up, for better or for worse?
Yeah, for better or for worse, we're in a very different environmental landscape. So for a lot of you who are either founders or investors, you're seeing this. But I think before it was a seller's market, and let's call founders sellers, where it was, this is my company, these are my terms, take it or leave it. If you're not in, I got 5 other term sheets. No, you're not getting a board seat. No, I don't need to make money, and call me next Tuesday, basically. And I think the world has rapidly changed now, and it's changed in 12 months, where suddenly you can't have that level of control. And so now the importance becomes of who the founders partner with, because the buyers effectively, which are the investment companies now, have a lot more influence and power. And I think one of the things that a lot of companies are having a tough time with is, for those who don't have to raise money for the next 2.5 years, you're good. You control your destiny, and if you're making money, you definitely control your destiny. And if you're losing money, as long as you have a 2.5 year runway, at least, unless AI takes over, then it really doesn't matter what runway you have. But say 2.5 years, I think you're good. It's companies that have to raise in the next 12 months that I think are going to have to take a hard look at changing their valuations, because I think the valuations of yesterday are not the valuations of tomorrow. Multiples have changed, and I just think people made too much money too quickly, and that's not real life. I think so much money got printed, it meant that people were just paying stupid money, and when you see some of the tech stocks getting whacked 80-90%, it's because it should have never been up there, right? DoorDash should not have been worth more than GM. It probably didn't make sense. And even to most of us, it didn't make sense. But we said oh yeah, but it's going to be huge. Everyone wants DoorDash, with 16 DoorDashes. So I think that the game has changed. So now I think for entrepreneurs, who they partner with is more important than the valuation, because the people they partner with are going to have a lot more influence on their company, on their boards. So you've got to partner with value add funds. Doesn't mean you have to agree all the time. You can have healthy debate. You can push on each other. You have to have that. But you've got to find people that, okay, I'm going to ride the next 5 years with, and I'm going to have to listen to them to some degree. And I think that's a little bit of a change in dynamic to where you didn't really have to listen to the investors that much because everything was up.
Yeah, it's interesting because you mentioned DoorDash. When the world went apocalyptic in March of 2020 and everything collapsed, and all of a sudden you'd think, well, food needs to be delivered. But to also your point about gross margin, they had negative gross margin. And as a result, during the pandemic, Airbnb, which is super profitable, but nobody was traveling or renting homes, was thriving in public markets. DoorDash was getting crushed simply because they didn't have a positive gross margin profile.
But it's funny. This is some of the smartest investors in the world are giving that level of valuation to something that has no gross margin. It's like things really did go a little bit, haywire.
Yeah, there's a lot of, back to your Amazon point, there's a lot of companies out there that have actually raised more money than they've generated in revenue. Most and you haven't heard of most of them because a lot of them are dead. And that was a
someone morbid in the front row. It's like, yeah.
Somebody's on the other side of that. But it leads us to this next question about like, what's the most appropriate foundation to build, right? Because if we're building, billion-dollar revenue brands that last, and I mean, again, biasly, O'Neill is 70 years old, 71 this year actually, and that's not easy to do. And so, what have you seen as an investor, particularly for some founders out there today that are, in the early stages of building that foundation? What's important?
Yeah, look. I mean, I keep it very simple. So my world is very eat it, drink it. That's pretty much it. Really. Wear it. Beauty. It's put it in you or on you is what I stick to, because I feel that come hell or high water, people have to do that. Everyone's going to eat. Everyone's going to drink. Everyone's going to get drunk, and everyone's going to feed their families and their pets. Fundamentally, that won't change as long as we live to be humans. So I think that the key, though, is, and we talk about this a lot, but my philosophy, my business partner's philosophy is like all the big brands of yesterday, and someone had a great quote that I saw yesterday. I should put it up. I can't read it. What got you here won't get you there. Although that was super interesting, because you have to evolve. And these big corporate giants are not going anywhere. They are there, but they are what I call melting icebergs. Like, the polar caps are not refreezing. These companies are, you're not going to wake up tomorrow and say, guys, fake news, sugar's back, let's load up on the Pepsi. Like, that's just not going to happen. And I think that people want to feel better about themselves. It's just a fun, I don't care whether you're rich, poor, whether you live in New York City, Boise, Idaho, you're going to feel better about yourself. And that starts with what goes on your body. So a lot of times, what I look for is keeping it simple, but what has been done in the past, and how can you take stuff people understand and make it better going forward? And I think in America today, people still want fundamentally stuff that they kind of understand, that they kind of grew up with, their parents grew up with, but that's got the twist for the future. So, I'll give you one example. One thing I kind of know fairly well is beverages, and it's just simple stuff like, sodas are bad for you. Arguably the number one causing element of diabetes in this country. Like, that's what it is. Unfortunately, it's also where it's driven a lot is lower income, because we say the 2 liters for 59 cents, and that's what you have for dinner. So what the fundamental basis is pick something people understand. So with sodas, I invested in 2 different things. One was a kombucha called Health Aid. Every guys drink kombucha. This seems like a kombucha group, I feel.
It is.
Yeah. And you guys love it. It's like kombucha, it's so cool. Like, it's the next wave. And like half the people wearing hats and the big kimonos with the Om on it. Like, that's the kombucha guy. And it did well. Super cool brand, grew nicely, but never really unlocked potential. Like, it was just steady, steady, steady. And the reason is because this group is like, we are who we are. I love kombucha. I drank Health Aid. I was into it. Good margins, made money. So we did well on that. But it's not mainstream America. You can't spell it. What does it mean? Where do retailers put it? Like, it's Japanese tea. Is it a tea? Fermented? Will I have gas? Who the fuck knows? Like, there's so many different questions. So one of the other brands actually that I found that was on Shark Tank is a brand called Poppi. And Poppi is just soda. Like, we just kept it simple. It's better for you soda. So it's, you got the apple cider vinegar in there, which helps your gut. And people drank soda, a little geek story, but sodas all started basically as medicinal tonics. Like, Coke was sold in pharmacies. Dr. Pepper is called Dr. Pepper for a reason. It was all pharmacy. Pepsi, to be nasty, solved dyspepsia, which is bloating you get in your stomach when you eat food that's not refrigerated, blah, blah, blah. So sodas were fundamentally supposed good for you 100 years ago. Obviously, things have changed, and smoking's bad, and so is sodas. So things have evolved. Poppi was simple, where it's like, it's soda, and people understand it. Like, the mainstream American audience gets what that is, and it's just better soda. Why am I drinking the old stuff? And that brand just took off like a rocket ship. So I think part of it is giving people stuff they understand, but making it better. That's like, and to use my French, it's the raison d'etre. Every brand that anybody in this room has here has to have a real reason for being, like a real reason. Don't be the number 6 kombucha. Don't be the number 15th vaginal lube. Like, you've got to be like, one or two to market, and have a real bloody reason. And I think that to me, the first two tenets is real reason for being, and then make it something that mainstream America can understand, not overly complex. That lays your foundation, and it should be an evolution of what the past.
No, that's good advice. It makes me think of a friend right now that started was a venture studio out of LA that started a good for you candy. And the brand was a shameless plug. It's called Shameless. And that makes a lot of sense. It's a good example of, reverse engineering a hole in the market, calling it something that people can type into Google and not figure out how to spell. And that, has a reason for being. And it's remarkable how over-engineered a lot of brands are. We see it all the time. That's a good segue into kind of science versus art. Let's talk about the difference between kind of being a brand evangelist versus being a scientist. How do you balance those two things? Because they're both needed. And you're clearly on the other side of the table judging potential portfolio companies through that lens.
Marketing is interesting, complex these days. Technically, I'm supposed to be a cool marketer, but when I go into actual meetings, I tell people I'm too old. I really am. I'm too old to actually think I can actually market. Now, you can set the landscape and direction, but I think that, a few things. I think like a few years ago, everyone thought that the world was going to go DTC. Direct and consumer, forget, stores and real stuff. And suddenly, that's the way we're going to go. And so a lot of brands and companies, you guys may have some of them out there, that raised money, thought they could simply go one way only, online, direct to consumers. And they forgot about something called margin, and they forgot about what the amount of pound of flesh that Amazon takes from every company that goes through Amazon. So what happened is a lot of brands that didn't pivot from DTC to an omni-channel approach going everywhere died. And those though that only stayed at retail but didn't go online aren't growing the way they should. So the art science piece is a little bit like, one, how are you going to reach people? And I think there was a famous quote from the guy who made Coke effectively in the 50s, Robert Woodruff. And he said he wanted Coke to be within arm's reach of desire. And I think that's part of the premise for any brand, that you want to be online, but you want to be at Walmart. You want to be DTC, you want to be found everywhere, but you also want to be found in your convenience store. So I think that the first premise is you've got to be omni-channel. And if you just pick one lane or the other, unless you service dogs, that's the only, and I'll give you what I mean by that, is humans are the problem in that we change our mind all the time. So we're never going to get one product and use that product 3 times a day, every day for the rest of our life. Now, dogs will do that. They eat 3 times a day, same meal, don't change it up on me, make sure it's good, I'm consistent. So that actually is the only model I've seen in the world where DTC, there's a brand called Farmer's Dog, it's just massive, that actually does that, and it's fresh, you can eat it in a pinch. It's human grade food that you serve to your dog. I'd put some onions in it if I were you, but you can, and it works great. The guy's got, he's a unicorn status brand revenue-wise, and hasn't raised us that much money simply because it works for dogs. But the science part is you have to kind of understand a few things. One, omni-channel approach. Two, that there is a little bit problematic situation where when you build a brand in today's world, and we'll build it for the next few years before actually companies are now using AIs to build your brands, which is interesting. But when you build the brands, the head of marketing for companies today needs to have a degree of wisdom, right? I've had experience, I'm managing, leading teams, et cetera, et cetera. Then you have the people who actually know how to turn a brand on and make it hot, which is usually the 23-year-old influencer who knows all the various social mediums. And the problem arises for me is when the head of marketing actually thinks they're cool. Because it's very difficult in this new world order to be a head of marketing with wisdom and have the cachet, but then you can't have your 21-year-old who really knows social media running the organization. So that's where your attention comes in. And I think this is the problem I'm having with a few of my companies. So I'm trying to let the leaders lead, but say, that leadership's got to flow all the way through. Because here's the artsy stuff, you've got to do the sciencey stuff, still to marketing, and let's not change roles.
I'm now understanding why the dog food market is so compelling. you only have to convince somebody once, and then you just feed your dog like kale and quinoa for life, 3 meals a day. They never switch. It's interesting to think about just that role of marketing in companies at scale when things become more, there's more in play, there's more things to measure. At O'Neill, we have a mantra that there's nobody from my organization in here, so I can say this out loud, but that we have artists report to scientists. Scientists do not report to artists. And you need the artist, to your point, because we're not cool enough to drive marketing strategies. But at the same time, there's parameters and there's a formula. Where in the growth of a consumer brand in food and beverage, and I could certainly speak to it in apparel, but what's been your experience? Where does that inflection point start to really kick in? And are there examples of maybe one of your portfolio companies that's learned that lesson the hard way?
I mean, it's a few things. It totally varies because if you're in beauty and you're creating your own beauty brand, if I always do that here, you get to 50, 60, 80 million today in beauty. That's a great size. That's like legitimate premium beauty. People want to buy you. In beverage, no one gives a crap if you're 80, 90 million dollars. And today it just keeps getting high. You're going to be 200 plus for people to actually care. So different categories, and pet, you've got to be 150. So different categories have different scale levels that now you've arrived. It's your inflection point, right? The other thing is, at what point do you partner with Big Brother? Which is the second part of that journey. Because I think the problem is these big corporations have built the machine so bloody well that they know how to get efficient, how to get the trains on the track, just the operation skill set. They just can't create brands. I mean, it's tough to think about every big company in America. When's the last time they actually created a new brand? It's been tens of 20, 30, 40 years since they've actually done it. And it's why new brands are born every day, because the big guys allow the others to get born. So effectively, entrepreneurship or innovation has been sourced out to us, right? Across the country, Americans' jobs is to design the brands of tomorrow for the big corporations. So you want to be independent. You've got to have that independent mindset without going to the big corporations, because they will stifle creativity. But there hits a point where you've got to partner with someone. And there's very few that can go it alone. And there's some that can do that, and that's power to them. But most of the time, you need to partner with someone, and knowing when that is and who to partner with is critical. Because I think that's what allows your brand to sustain the journey. Because entrepreneurs can be fast and visionary and exciting, but for your brand built to last, you need a partner, I think, at some point, once you've mapped your DNA out, with someone big to take you to be a brand that's here 10 years, 20 years from now.
Right. No, that resonates. Actually, for context, Aloha Group, which is the parent company of O'Neill, we have a number of other brands, and we're actually trying to figure out how to get the best of both worlds. And then it's a growing process. It's not easy, and we'll always try and improve it. But we're trying to take the kind of brand agnostic economies of scale and infrastructure and apply them to an independently financed and owned team, where we become an investor in the brand, but we provide finance, operations, technology, things that are brand agnostic, and without taking 100% of the company. We want to actually leave a big piece of that incentive for founders and for those independent teams.
But that's the new model. That's kind of how it should be. The problem is, a lot of times back in the day, and I've been a bit of beneficiary of this, but it's the wrong strategy. It's like companies would basically come in and just buy the whole thing. They're like, I'm going to come in, I'm going to buy the company, and then they don't keep enough of an incentive for the founders or the guys and girls who actually understand the sizzle of the brand. They've paid them out. So now they've got to figure out their journey going forward. And so they made the mistake of buying it out completely. The new world order is going to be buying a piece, whatever that piece is, 10, 20, 30, 50, whatever it is, and leaving enough for the people in the company who started it to keep building it over time. And I think when you do that, then both incentives are aligned. And I think that is the new world order.
Yeah, we're constantly trying to compare ourselves or find a comp, and there just isn't anything out there. But we're trying to take the upside of financial investors and the upside of strategic investors, without the downside of either, which feels like an impossible model to chase, but I'm going to die trying. But it's really for those reasons, because to scale in today's world, it becomes very, very technical. Data matters. Mistakes, and particularly leverage mistakes, are catastrophic. And also just to be, to qualify for things like, working capital, like to get an asset-backed lending facility, you need to be closing, GAAP accounting months and 7-day closes. You need massive reconciliation and automation to do that. And brands that are direct-to-consumer heavy, that don't have any underlying assets, you can't finance direct-to-consumer revenue. You can only finance wholesale revenue, hence your omni-channel. Like to engineer all that is really hard. And you can have the best idea in the world, but unless you partner with the right person or surround yourself with the right resources, it's difficult to kind of break through that barrier. And that's not for everybody. But it's certainly I appreciate it as an operator, and I know you look at that through the lens as an investor. Maybe one last thing, because I do want to leave some time for questions.
Yeah.
I do think there's a lot of folks in here that want it. But how do you think about? You touched a little bit on it before, but the dilemma between youth and wisdom. I just want to flush that out, because there's a lot of youth and a lot of wisdom in this room. And
wisdom is in the front row, right, of the section, I feel.
Maybe help us understand a little bit more about that, or just how you think about that difference and kind of what to embrace versus what to run from.
Yeah, it's fair enough. Like I said, it's a tough one, because we live in a new world order where, take Facebook. A 21-year-old went on to create one of the most iconic brands of all time, and by the time he cashed out, he was 29. So it's like, it's that sort of insanity has never been seen in the history of, business sort of thing. So it is a little bit different. So I think the good news, bad news is, there's individuals who are super young who've gone on to create the future, but those are such rarefied air that can't be the benchmark for everybody else. Like, I think that then there's the rest of us, and how does that work? And I think part of it is, I use the King Arthur analogy sometimes, like, King Arthur had a round table, and the reason he had a round table is so that everyone had equal thoughts and voice around that, even though they knew he was a king. And so in this new age, whether you're the king or the queen, you basically have to surround yourself with people that fill your gaps. It's like it's a very simple statement to make, but it's amazing how much or how often like hires like. Because you like somebody, you're like, I like you. You like him because they like you. So you're like, so you can't be hiring friends. As my business partner, it's not show friends, it's show business. And it's like, I think the big part starts with, if you are seasoned leader, you've done this, wisdom, then hire around you the young, the dynamic, people who make you a little bit uncomfortable, that push the envelope for your brand. And then if it's the other way around, if you're a young entrepreneur with like super smart and a brilliant idea, then get yourself experience around the table and be open to listening to it. And I think that founders that fill the gaps that way, I found do amazingly well, where they bring, like, even in Vital Proteins, Kurt is a rocket scientist, brilliant guy, but his head of sales was completely different. He hired her from tech, but he saw something in her that she was a dynamo, and he put her in. Very different people, but that worked. And I think founders that bring in very different people that completely either fill my wisdom gap or fill my youth sort of inspiration, personality gap, that's where it wins.
So being young and wise is knowing what you don't know. And
then you're Buddha. Buddha was
I've been coming to Summit for 10 years because I try and be the dumbest guy in the room. And I always look around. I think, if I'm not, if it feels like I'm the smartest guy in the room, I'm in the wrong room.
That's it. Exactly.
We constantly try and hire people smarter than us, and we try and encourage that culturally, but it's not intuitive. Most people, don't want to be outperformed by somebody beneath them. But ironically, it actually works the opposite. But I guess the wisdom in youth is to be the dumbest guy in the room.
Throw to questions.
Yeah, let's take some questions.
Right up front, boom.
Yes, thank you for all your wisdom. What is your
Not your youth.
Wait, no youth at the table? Fine, we get it, it's all good.
What are your thoughts around raising capital if you don't need it and you just want to cash out for, like, say I want to sell 20% of my shares, be set for life? Is that enough of a reason to take on a partner if we don't need one?
The question is, well, you're in a great position, first of all. Do I just summarize this? If I don't need the money for the business, but is it worth cashing out a percentage of your shares, even if you don't need a partner? It's an interesting question. My initial reaction in today's world is hell yes, because very few people are in that position today where they can cash out, still keep enough money. So it's a few things. So I've dealt with founders, and I've always told founders that take some money off the table. Because if you end up making it really big, what you took off the table won't matter. And if you end up failing, what you took off the table will really matter. And I think that, so I always advocate, if it's meaningful money to you, and meaningful will vary for each person in the room, but if it's meaningful money for you that allows you to enjoy the journey, because part of it is there's the destination and the journey. And I get antsy because I have certain brands, I'm like, I want to just sell it already, but it's like, no, there's a journey to it. And I think if you get nervous about stuff, people will feel that in your brand, in your company. So if you can enjoy life more by taking some off the table, you know that game show where you'd like answer a bunch of questions and then you'd hit the buzzer, so you'd cash the money in? It's kind of like that, because at what point if you don't hit the buzzer and the whole stack goes, then it's painful. So yes, my answer is always take some off the table.
I'll give you an example, just real quick, of one of the brands in our portfolio that we're operating there on the Aloha Group platform. Was a founder that really kind of came from nothing. Brand grew really, really quickly, and started having kids, and there was, I could notice he was tired and stressed out, and we actually encouraged him. We didn't take any money off the table despite being part owners in the brand, but we really wanted him to take something to, pay for a mortgage, put some, money away for kids in college, and just not be distracted by that, because the energy and the focus we got in the business after that accelerated it even more. It was almost like an investment from our side of the table. So, but to Ro's point, if you can, secondary liquidity markets today are
dry.
Or do they exist even?
Sahara.
So if you can get it, you should. Sorry, where the lights are too bright, I can't see, but I see a hand in the back.
Could you talk more about the downsides of taking a financial investor versus a strategic investor? Daniel, you mentioned really trying to find that perfect blend. What have you found so far?
The question was the downsides of taking a financial investor, and is the appeal more in a strategic, or asking for the downsides of both?
The downsides of both. You mentioned trying to find the perfect blend.
Yeah, the downside, and I can say this tongue in cheek because I sit on both sides of the table now, but the downsides of a financial investor is he got other than Ro, a bunch of financial engineers in a midtown Manhattan office suite with a Rolodex full of advisors and operating partners that can make an introduction to solve a problem. That's not as effective as having infrastructure. Like with a strategic, when we bring on a brand and there's a problem, we actually have a sourcing and supply chain capability. We have an internal digital marketing agency that services all the brands. We actually solve the problem. The downside of that, as we were just talking about, though, is that most strategics don't leave you another bite at the apple. And for the life of me, I can't figure out why that is. I think it's just been this rinse, wash, and repeat model. That being said, when you've got, financial investors that have narrow and deep expertise where they're focused, what do you say, eat it on you and in you? Like that, like if there's a focus, because there's a lot of spray and pray investors out there that are financial engineers. And that's very different than having sector focus with consumer insights that can be actually tactical. And, Kavu, because I know some of the folks that work for him too, will actually, deploy and embed people inside that organization. So I think you can't necessarily put all strategics and all financials in one bucket, but the general mantra is, strategics comes with infrastructure and solutions. Financial investors come with, capital, advice, and again, typically a lower position on the cap table. But you got to surround yourself with the right people, regardless of which side of the table.
It also depends on the position you're in. Like if you're in a great position, always find money that will help you do more than just money. So if you find partners that you know can help you with freight and distribution, warehousing, DTC, or brand building, then you go with those first. But if you're strapped and you really need money, you take it from wherever the hell you get it.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially today. Take it right now for the next 2 years so you don't stress. Top left over there.
Yeah. So you're in beverage and beauty primarily and inside out. Summit did an event in Tulum a couple of times. And just south of Tulum is the Shark Tank Reserve, Biosphere, UNESCO Heritage World Site. And many of the world's beauty and beverage brands are represented on 100 miles of beach south of there in plastics that go about 5 feet deep in every direction. When you talk about looking at new ways of doing all the things, do you consider that part of the cycle? Because that's essentially an outsourced cost of a brand that's being outsourced to everybody else. And I'm wondering if you think about, in your branding and production side of things, that part of the process.
Yeah, so the beverages that we have done, and I've done in the last, 7, 8 years, have all predominantly, and it's 100% you bring that up, is we do either glass or aluminum, which is much easier to recycle and back in through the system. The problem is plastic. And it's fundamentally mind-boggling to me that maybe it's something AI could fix, but it's that how little money has been put against, or how there's a lack of a solution to plastic that just disappears like this. And the big guys, I think, have looked at it, but I don't know if they've looked at it in earnest, right? We put a man on the moon 50, 60 years ago, but we haven't solved plastic. So that's a mind-boggling one for me. And it's tough for, I think, the smaller beverage entrepreneurial brands. Like, we're solving it through using other mediums like glass or aluminum. But the plastic, and I think the consumer audience today is trying to gravitate more towards vessels that you can recycle, that are better for the planet. The problem is you use so much historical plastic that goes into the system on the mega brands that are already out there. And the only way to solve that is a plastic that's biodegradable. That's got to be solved at a massive level. I think including government and major industry. Like, it should be one of the biggest innovations to occur, and it has not. And maybe it's beyond my skill set of how to get there, but that's kind of what needs to happen. But I don't think enough attention has been put against it, because generally in this world, when enough attention goes to something, it gets solved. For some reason, that one does not seem to be getting solved, at least in a meaningful enough way.
Yeah, James.
JB. Oh, celebrity. Interesting.
Where does celebrity fit into brand?
It's very different, I think. There's a few ways celebrity fit in. Depends who you are. If you're Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, it doesn't matter at all, because anything the guy touches goes to gold. But I think that the traditional celebrity model of even 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago is not the same model. I think that in today's world order, everyone has the ability to be a celebrity effectively. And so you have the nano, the micro, the macro, and the mega influencers, like a pyramid. And I think that most successful brands of today have to build at all levels, like a cake. And the Beyoncés of the world, to me, are more the icing on the cake versus the layers below it. And I think that old school thinking is like, oh shit, we got to build a brand, let's get a celebrity. And a lot of times you looked at brands that have put on major celebrities, and it hasn't helped the brand. It didn't, because there wasn't a full 360 on everything, right? There weren't a bunch of influencers talking about it. It wasn't a brand that had enough disruption, or the creative was cool. And then the celebrity turbocharges. If a celebrity comes in to carry your brand, that's a problem. If as we define celebrity, A-list, major, courtside of the NBA finals, the way you define celebrity, is that person, he or she should be turbocharging your brand. And I think back in the day, they could carry the brand, but they can't do it anymore. I think now it's got to be done with a whole 360 approach. And that's why what confuses people, because a lot of the older school, and when I say older school, like you don't have to be old, but it's like you've been marketing for 15, 20 years and you want to pick an A-list celebrity because that's the way you fix your brand. It's not. You've got to have the layers. So it's, and then also, I think the celebrity game has also changed where they all want skin in the game now, thanks to 50 Cent and Vitaminwater. Everybody wants, it's a funny story actually. It's, when I was in Vitaminwater back in the day, it was like a cool-ish brand, like Lower East Side of Manhattan was cool, and different parts of Brooklyn was cool, but it wasn't like nationwide cool. So I thought, how do we create sizzle around this? And I liked hip hop music. I learned from my friend Josh up front. Worked for Bad Boy Records, the only white guy at Bad Boy Records as well. That's another funny story I'll tell you later on that one. But I thought the top, this is me, I'm learning at the time, right? So my influences, I'm aging myself, were radio DJs, by the way. Like back in the day, everybody listened to drive time radio and those guys were the influences. Anyway, so the biggest music at the time were Jay-Z and 50 were the two biggest stars in the world. I had no idea how to get to Jay-Z basically. And one of my really good friends, Seth Brodsky, knew how to get to 50. So I went to 50 and sat down, met with him, super smart guy, a little scary, but super smart guy. And he showed me some of the bullet wounds. But I said, look, bro, I got no money. I can probably pay him, I could pay him $500,000 or something. And like Gaddafi paid him $1 million to go perform in Libya and sent the jet for him. So again, we're aging myself here with Gaddafi. But anyway, so 50's like, don't worry about that. Your cash means nothing to me anyway. Just give me skin in the game. So I'm like, oh, that's not a bad idea. I mean, how much could the skin be worth for this guy? Like, we've done the math. Plus, I put a strike price of X. So I'm like, these guys aren't gonna make that much money. So, but give him credit. He got behind the brand, and every talk show he went on, every show he put on, it was Vitaminwater right in front center. And then we went and actually he created his own formula, Formula 50. And he did just super turbocharge the brand. I give you that. It's a rarity. And at one point, people thought he owned Vitaminwater. So the actual founder of Vitaminwater met 50 one day and he said, great to meet you. I'm Darius. I'm the actual owner of Vitaminwater. And 50 and I have a deal now where I really don't say how much money he makes and he doesn't beat the shit out of me. But Vitaminwater was supposed to sell for $400 million. I thought 50 would make a decent amount of money. Sold for $4 billion. He made a shit ton of money. So, and that changed the equity game because Fifth is not a shy guy. So once he made that money, then Eminem and Dre and everybody knew about it and that went out. And so that's when everyone started doing their own skin in the game. Dr. Dre, Beats by Dre, and Jay-Z just sold his liquor company now. And so everyone wants skin in the game. And that's also a big change on the celebrity model where they see the big numbers and they want to share the upside, not just the paycheck.
It's an interesting example that we've seen shift in this, and the same brand that I was giving you the example about recapping and taking some money out. We built a brand called PSD Underwear. You would have never heard of it otherwise, except it's the largest consumer brand on TikTok ever, which I have other issues with today that weren't present at the time. But in that particular example, we actually brought a bunch of celebrities in, NBA and NFL players, and we gave them, we actually made them invest. And we made it was automatically in the money. So it was kind of like discounted warrant structures. And it was a very different reaction than when we otherwise just either grant equity or pay commissions, like essentially affiliate commissions to market on our behalf. And what happened was we very intentionally identified in the NBA big personalities who were really only known as basketball players who were desperate for recognition to be successful in business. And so it was almost like a personal, it was a personal like unquenched thirst. And that's a really powerful thing to unlock because in a lot of ways, these guys are smart and like they're surrounded by opportunity. Everybody's trying to extract something. But if you can identify somebody that like will go step onto the battlefield with you and whose interests are aligned, that's how we've seen success with celebrities. It's definitely not going onto a influencer media desk and buying auction-based prices for views.
I think you left one part of the 50 story out, which I think is really what made it genius, which was the next celebrity. Because it was this dichotomy of this bad boy and this home.
America's darling.
Yeah. So and basically what you told the world was it's for everyone.
Jennifer Aniston. Yeah. Yeah, again, it's horses for courses. Jennifer's on Smart, but like I think they were connected because Vitamin Smart were like, it was connected. But yeah, I think a lot of times people also don't, they don't pick the right celebrity for the brand. It boils down to, again, like, dude, I love, I love, Harry Styles, right? Who doesn't love Harry Styles? That guy dates everybody on the planet, but it's very impressive. But kind of jealous of Harry. Not really, honey. I'm just saying, in theory, if I was single,
Don't worry, you're still getting married.
Of Harry Styles. But people are like, I love Harry Styles. Now, if Harry fits your brand, it's amazing, right? But I think a lot of times people just pick a celeb. And so for Smartwater, Jennifer had such a pure fit. I crack a joke, don't record it, but it's like, it's the longest relationship she's had with Smartwater. It's 15 years. It was like a long one, yeah. But but she got behind the brand, give her credit. I mean, she's also a super smart woman, like master marketer, knows her own brand, knows every brand she partners with. But yes, you can have both ends of the spectrum in America's Bad Boy and America's Darling, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for context, a bad fit for us was our O'Neill European division was very excited that on a beach somewhere in like Majorca, Ed Sheeran was, in this, O'Neill rash guard.
Surfing.
So excited. They're so excited. And I won't even spoil the accent that this news got delivered with, but the shock that came to our face in the US of just the kind of culture clash of those two things. Love his music, nice guy, but completely off brand. And by the way, nobody, maybe other than Elon Musk, nobody looks worse in a white rash guard with pasty white. That was a bad fit. And so, no, we did not publish that.
I mean, if he had been a sick surfer, that would have been great, though. Ed
For
Sheeran
sure, but he was like, I don't even think he was carrying a board. If he was carrying like a boogie board, like a soft boogie board, and like tighty whities or something. I don't know. That it's just that would not have helped our cause.
Should we do one more question, maybe? Sure.
Yeah.
At what point will you define where a company becomes a brand?
When a company becomes a brand? Yes, very, 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 very interesting question. This is when you do what I call cul-de-sac research. And it's funny. In New York City, you look at the trash. When you start seeing what's in the trash, you realize it's becoming a brand. It happened with Snapple, happened with Vitaminwater, happened with Bai, happened with Body Armor. It's happening with Poppi now. It happened with Suja as well. You saw, and sorry, my friend in the back, that's because some brands had plastic, but it was, you see it in the trash. But there's not a real sign because revenue-wise, brands can vary, but it's very much about when it starts getting talked about. So you can see it as you follow stuff online, and you see it when I bring up certain brands. They're like crickets. I mean, you bring up certain brands, it's part of the conversation. So I think that with influence, when a brand becomes part of the conversation with influencers, is when you start seeing it's a brand, not a company.
I'll give you the opposite of the spectrum. When we know brands are on their way out, there's one litmus test, at least in the outerwear and kind of apparel space, is as soon as I see an entire family wearing the same brand walking through an airport, it's over.
Juicy Couture. Juicy Couture, yeah. Everyone loved Juicy till they didn't.
I kid you, still to this day, whenever we travel as a family, like I'm always hunting. I'm like, which brand are we going to see on an entire family? And
so yeah, I brought that up. I don't know who asked that question. Lulu to me is a super anomaly, and we talked about that. Do you want to throw out why Lulu might be different? Function. What Lulu delivered first and foremost versus a lot of other brands that deliver fashion first, they delivered function first, then they rolled in fashion. And because it works, and they continue to change enough variety on Lulu. Right, with Juicy, the problem was it was blazing juicy in the back, and then you didn't really have to look and feel fit, just like roll on the Juicy and off you go. Whereas with Lulu, it's function first, then they have variety of branding, and they've got down the core essentials that and then they layer creativity on top. So they've got a brilliant layering strategy. It is the way to build fashion brand if you can.
Yeah, none of our, actually with the exception of PSD, none of our brands are absent of an underlying utilitarian function. They're all active consumer lifestyle or wellness oriented, and that was our belief before the pandemic. But that's a key variable in the equation. We live in a ski town in Colorado, and I would not apply the same stress test to a ski. I see entire families in Arc'teryx or other brands. Those are highly utilitarian. But anything that's pure fashion, if I leave you with one thought, absent of the utility, the same consumer sentiment and psychology that's attracted people to a brand in mass quickly is also the same reason why they're going to abandon you in a heartbeat when the next shiny object shows up. If there isn't an underlying utility and a reason for being for that brand, take secondary liquidity when you can raise it.
Yeah. Don't have fun for the sake of it. Have fun with functionality. Put the fun in functionality, basically. That's
All right.
good.
Well, I think we're done competing with dry land.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys.